listening to the Unshackle Your Life podcast with Jacquie Polverari, and each week we talk all things money, business, personal growth, and we dive deep, exploring the hundreds of things that shackle us unconsciously from our own true potential. And you'll discover tips and tactics to start unlocking your shackles and release an extraordinary life. Thanks for spending time with me today, and let's dive right in. So hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Unshackle Your Life podcast. Today I'm joined by someone who has truly gone full circle in evolving her life, an entrepreneur, podcast host, and a passionate supporter of women in re-entry, Jacquie Polverari. Jacquie, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Debbie. I really appreciate it. It's great to see you.
Awesome. I'm really excited to talk to you today because your story is really going to hit home with parents and people who feel they're letting someone down. What you've experienced and how gracefully you've come out of it is truly inspirational. But I know that despite what appears to be all roses on the outside, one bad choice on your part could have self-destructed the very things that are most important to you. I'd like you to walk people through your story, and I'll ask our listeners to keep this question top of mind. Does one bad choice define us forever? So it's all yours. Share as much or as little as you want. As
Okay. Well, I got caught up in 2009. I owned a title company with an attorney, and I committed mortgage fraud. When the mortgage industry was imploding, I took a mortgage out on my own house to fund my business. Well, that is illegal. And really the most illegal part is I lied on the application. I overstated my income. And also the house was in my husband's name, not my name. So, and I didn't disclose the first mortgage. My entire family was working for me. So in my mind, failure was not an option. I was not going to close the business. And I committed this fraud. I went on with it for about a year and a half, 2 years, paying the mortgage. I never didn't pay the monthly mortgage payment, but the attorney that was my partner started to get investigated for other things. When he got investigated, then he gave my name up along with other people, and they started to investigate me. And that's pretty much how I got caught up. And I immediately pled guilty when the FBI raided my house, 14 agents. I was in the shower and heard knocking on the door, and there they were. I didn't open the door. They came in, which was a little awkward. So, and apparently that is not just to me, that is what they do to anybody who commits a federal crime. And that is to make sure that the house is safe for them. I've learned this later on. And they raided the house. They were looking for some information. I had moved my office back to my house and was looking for information for my partner's files, which I did not have at my house. So they took everything, my computers and so forth. And I pled guilty. I went to a plea agreement. I went to sentencing. I got 1 year and 1 day in federal prison. I ended up with $1.9 million of, I think it was $1.9 million restitution and originally, which I later fought and did win. But I was collectively responsible for being a partner in the business. So anything that had happened, I was collectively responsible for. I did my time. And while I was there, Debbie, when I tell you a culture shock, I live in a very small suburban town. I have 3 beautiful children who were brought up in the small suburban high school, middle school, grammar school. I have a great husband, very supportive. And I went to this camp and met some of the most wonderful, beautiful women I've ever met. So diversified. And it was my time to learn. I needed that time. I think that we're given what we actually needed. And I spent 7 months in Danbury, met a lot of women, learned a lot of things, and decided when I came home, I was going to not only change myself in my direction, So I opened Evolution Reentry Services for women. And that's what I do. I help women going to prison, coming home. Reentry is a very difficult, as you know, very difficult from everybody you've spoken to, time for any woman at all. Women lose their husbands, their houses, children, their relationships. I was very blessed and fortunate. I did not lose any of that. So I help women get jobs. I'm also self-employed, so I didn't have to worry about that terrible thing about telling people in an interview my crime. And went back to school, and I'm still in school. I think I'm forever going to be in school. But I found out if I'm in school, I don't have to pay my student loan. So while I'm in school, that's a little bit about my story.
Awesome. That is a snapshot.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot to try and condense, but it is.
I know. So let's go back a little bit. Do you have any brothers and sisters? What was the dynamic like at your home growing up?
I have two older brothers. My oldest brother was and still is somebody I look up to. I mean, he was number one everything. Number one baseball, number one football, number one music. He got full scholarships to like 3 different schools for different various athletic things. My other brother also number one tennis, number one music. So I came along. I play flute. I play tennis. Was very good at it. Not number one. So I chose academics. I was brought up in a household where I had my cousins living upstairs from me who were very beautiful. And I was just known as, I remember being about 13 years old, laying in my driveway, and my uncle standing there, and he was looking at me and my cousins. We were laying on tin foil to try and get a tan.
I remember that.
You're part of us, yeah. And I remember him saying, "Oh my God, I won't say their names, but they are going to be models, and Jackie, she'll be the lawyer someday." So I always had that. You know, my brothers would make fun of me. I always had a weight issue, and my brothers would call different names, and my mother would say, "Oh, that's what boys do. It's okay." So I had a lot of self-esteem issues growing up.
And that's a traditional Italian family, right? That you grew up with? Just guessing by the last name.
Yeah. That's my husband's last name, but it is a traditional Italian household I brought up in.
And you're describing so many women's upbringings where, you know, they're pigeonholed into a box based on being a woman or being, you know, the third of a whole bunch of very successful kids and so on. That's hard on anybody's self-esteem and be able to see themselves out. So it's a journey to get out of there. So I have my questions kind of bounce around a little bit. Everybody knows that.
Okay, there's no question.
Trying to build a little bit of a, you know, where you were before. So I know that you had a number of legal named businesses before this happened, but they were all kind of in the same industry. So your industry, the title industry, that's real estate, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So what was your long-term goal for your business at the time, and why did you end up in title search?
It was an accident.
Like so many of us.
I had no long-term goal. I was going through a divorce. I had 2 little kids, and my brother owned a title company. I was a notary, so I needed some extra money, and he said, "Well, I'll teach you how to do closings." At that time in Connecticut, notaries mortgages were huge, and mortgage companies would fax the documents, and we would just go to a borrower's house and have the documents notarized. That really was what a closing consisted of then. And I said, "Oh, that's easy. I can do that." I was in theater. So theater was we would have shows come in and it would be 2-week runs. We'd build the show, it would run. So I had a lot of time in between shows that I really needed to make up money for. So I started doing that for him. And I really liked it. I was pretty good at it. I used to time myself on how quick I could do a closing. So I ended up starting my own closing company. And that was, I think, I called it Complete Closings at the time. It was
That's creative.
It was 1980. I don't even remember but that's how I got started. And then I had a client say to me, "Do you know how to do title searches?" And I said, "Oh yeah, I do." I had no clue how to do a title search. And I said, "Of course I do." And he had sent me over like 20 title searches. I'm like, oh wow, I really better go and learn how to do title searches. So I bit the bullet. I learned how to do searches on my own. I read and read and read. And Connecticut's a very odd state compared to the rest of the country in America. And we are town-based. There's only 2 states that are town-based. The rest of the country is county-based or registry-based.
Right.
So I learned how to do title searches and started doing that. And that progressed. So I couldn't call it Complete Closings anymore. So now I had to change that. And I've really just kind of went with it. I've always been very fortunate in getting work. And as time progressed, my brother's company closed. His partner and him parted ways. So my brother came to work for me, and my older brother had lost his job. So he also came to work for me. And my father was working for my other brother. So they all came to work for me. And I met my husband at the time. So I taught him how to do title searches, and we kind of progressed from there.
That is a lot of people on your plate that end up in your business without not being by choice.
Yeah.
It
was a big, I could say it was a blessing, but a tough one as well.
Yeah.
It was tough. More pressure.
Okay. So I'm going to jump my next question because you kind of answered that, but I'm going to dance a little bit around of it. What is it about being an entrepreneur that has driven you to be an entrepreneur? Because we both know that being an entrepreneur is not easy like people think. It's not sitting on the beach and doing nothing. There's a lot of stuff that you might not want to do and so on, but there is a definite joy that you get out of being an entrepreneur that you do not get from being employed by somebody. What is it? What is that for you?
I think it's freedom. I started my career working years ago, working for Smith Barney, Upham Harris, I really wanted to be a stockbroker. And back then, women were not stockbrokers.
No.
So every time I wanted to take the Series 7 test, they said, no, you're administrative. So I quit. I went to school for social work. And somehow,
that's very different.
And somehow, when I was going through my divorce, I realized I wanted to be there for every one of my kids' events. And then, as you know, when you're an entrepreneur, you become addicted to the fact that you can choose to attend anything, not attend it. You could take your business with you, not with you. And there's positives and negatives. And ever since then, I've worked for myself.
Yeah, some of us call ourselves functionally unemployable.
Exactly.
It took me a whole bunch of years to figure out that the reason why, and I worked mostly on contract. I've been an employee, but for me, 18 months to 2 years was the life expectancy of any project that I did, because that's the point in entrepreneurship, that you want to move to the next level. You want to get more stuff happening. And in the world of employment, it's the same old. And that I kept banging into that, but I'm still learning. It took me a number of iterations to try and figure out why that was happening, until I went, oh, that's because you're supposed to be doing this, which is your side hustle. So
it's true. Yeah, I didn't like the fact that people told me how far I can go as a woman back in the 80s. So I decided to just choose that on my own path, which
Awesome.
you know.
Okay, so in your story, so you eventually you end up in Danbury, which is it's the Martha Stewart type jail, or is, I don't know exactly, but you literally had your life put on hold for 4 years while they investigated your business partner.
6 years. It was actually
6 totally.
yes.
Wow, that's even harder. That makes this question even bigger.
Yeah.
So how did you keep moving forward, knowing that there was a high likelihood that all control over your own life would be out of your own hands, likely with a prison sentence, even if it was a fairly light and compassionate prison sentence? Did it just explode? Now, I've heard you two girls describe that period of time in their own words as it was hard to predict mom's behavior, and they felt the pressure to be perfect. Did life just implode, or what happened in those 6 years to put you in the state of mind you were in when you checked yourself in?
There was no progressing. I isolated myself. I was humiliated, but yet I still had to continue a business that I had to change directions. Really, I moved my business back to my house. I made it very small. I downsized quite a bit, but it was tough on my kids because, like they said, I would wake up, and if my day started off with a phone call from the FBI asking some questions based on my case or based on anything else, the rest of my day was terrible. Or if I went to get a cup of coffee and saw someone in town from our very small town who made a comment to me. I had a very difficult neighbor. I had 2 very, very difficult neighbors that did not want a felon living next door to them. No matter what, they didn't care. They didn't care about my story, what happened. It didn't matter. Or that I took full responsibility. They just did not want that. So I did not move forward for those 6 years. I existed. And unfortunately, my kids today are affected. I think they will tell you no, they are affected because they have become so afraid themselves of doing anything wrong that they're afraid to deviate in where any gray line might be.
Yes.
And some may say that's a wonderful place to be. I don't think so. I think living your life in fear is a terrible thing. And that's what I did for 6 years. So it was my head in the sand. There were days I could not get out of bed. My kids felt that. They were young at the time. I mean, they weren't young. They were at crucial ages. They were in high school. And those are the ages, especially my 2 daughters, if you've seen that podcast, they really needed their mom in high school.
Yep.
So I had to show up when I had to show up. But then there was days, my kids were very smart. They knew what was going on. I was honest with them from day one. I didn't want to play any game with them. They needed to know I'm not perfect. I made this terrible choice. Yep. And it's hard. I don't think any woman can move forward during that time.
I think what you're describing, and some people would think it's very unique to your situation to having been charged with something and subsequently get incarcerated. But that happens to, I think, to every parent at some point in time, where you get stalled and your kids feel like they're walking on eggshells because it can be as simple as something as being in the wrong job, where you know that you go in and your boss is going to be yelling at you every day. That it comes home, and it's hard to shed that shroud and be all fluffy and bubbly and supportive when you just, like you say, isolate, just want to pull a blanket over your head and go away.
Yeah, it is true. And I think the best thing for any parent, even for me, was communication. I let them know this is not about you. This is about me. I love you. I'm having a very bad day and I just can't do it. And ultimately it was my fault. How could I put it on my kids or my husband? I created it. They didn't.
Yeah. Well, circumstances did. So Did you said earlier on, you never considered closing the title business and just walking away from the real estate industry? Because as you just alluded to, you had two really difficult neighbors. One who just, he or she outed you in the community, right? And you
Yeah.
never considered walking away from that business. Why not? Because I know lots of people that would have said, screw you, I'm out of here.
Well, I think I became the best in my field and I was good at what I did, but where would I get a job? My husband worked for me. My father worked for me. My brothers worked for me. My mother worked for me. Where would I get a job? As a felon, a lot of people don't understand. I don't want to say especially a white collar felon, but a financial crime, there's no excuse for financial crime. And with my education level, I could never sustain the life we were living at all. And I liked what I did. I love title searching. So I got rid of the title company and I scaled down to a title search company.
Right.
And I love it. I love research. So there was no time that I would even allow anyone to get the better of me and take that poor decision and make me change my life for them.
That's your stubborn streak, right?
Oh yeah, that's the Italian that we talked about.
Well, it's interesting you talk about this is going to be a deviation. It wasn't on my things. When you talk about white collar crimes or financial crimes, and there being no reason, as more work is being done in mindset and money blocks, and that's an area that I'm very passionate about and that I work with my clients and so on, is that there's so much. And we've got all these people in the FBI and stuff, these forensic guys that say they're behavioral, whatever, but they truly don't understand how generational money blocks, the discussions around the dinner table, can create things that actually cause us to step off that path. And we don't even realize it until we dig later. So that's the joy of being in 2021. We're exposing things that they never would have thought about. It's coming. It's coming. I'm older than you. It's coming.
I went to a sentencing last Friday. This woman, she committed a financial crime, a state crime, not a federal crime. And she used company credit cards. Her daughter was going through a transplant. Her father was going through chemotherapy. And she signed her house over to her boss to make it right. She gave her boss all of the cars. She showed no restitution. She gave actually more than enough. And the judge gave her 10 years. And she's 62 years old. And this woman did everything right. I mean, in court, she turned and faced her victim. She was very apologetic. She made it right financially. And I spoke, and there was no justice at all in giving a 62-year-old woman. I talked to her yesterday. There was 16 women in her unit who had COVID, and now she's on a 17-day lockdown by herself because they have to quarantine if someone has COVID. And the purpose of that, to me, I don't know. So I hope we're going forward, and that's why I love to research. So
yeah. I think we are, and it's with people like you that are, and that are going to move things forward. It's always, one step forward, two steps back, but then we take 4 forward.
Yes.
And only 2 back. So we got to remember, it's not always 1, 2, 1, 2. There are leaps and bounds. So a sad story, very sad story. So one of the challenges and I know that we've sort of alluded to this a little bit, that strong people, confident people, both men and women have, and I did a podcast on this, is asking for help or even giving up control, even that simple delegation, because they believe so strongly in their own ability to figure stuff out and to do things. I'm guilty of it. A lot of our colleagues and friends are guilty of it. So do you think that as a single mom who is that type, so you're not a single mom now, but at the time you were a single mom, do you think you were trying to prove something to somebody?
Oh, of course. And I love these questions because I never get into these questions on my podcast. Yeah, I mean, I have daddy issues. I mean, I'm the first one to admit I have therapy for the last 15 years. The thing is, I can't seem to get past I know my issues. The problem is jumping past it. But yeah, I try to prove things to my father, my mother, that I am worthy of X, Y, and Z. I can do this, which is why I employed my whole family. I mean, right there, it's telling you, wow, there's something there.
Little red flag.
little red flag. Exactly. And yeah, especially for me, it's an odd thing. I'm very confident when it comes to business and academics, and I have such low self-esteem when it comes to my personal life. So I pour myself into what I do best, and that's business. And I think that in business, it's easy to not be seen as much as on a personal level. So academics is my thing, and it's, to be real, that's really what I'm always still trying to do, is thrive, to show that I am good enough.
But now you're more aware of that, because I've heard you talk about it, a few times, and that's the key. And I can relate to that. I don't have daddy issues. I spent a certain amount of my time trying to prove to my father that I could succeed doing it my way, not his way, because in my family, ask my brother and my sister, Dad's way is the only way. Mm-hmm. And he's got the results to back it up. Yes. I come from a fairly well-off middle-income family. Looking back, my parents are both still alive, and I'm sure they'll watch this, as they always do. Yeah, but it's not a life that I want. It's that average, and that's one of the drawbacks of the success of that middle layer, is that it's easy to be comfortable, but it's so much harder to step out and go beyond. So people like you and I, we want to go beyond, right? And not just for the financial thing. We want our lives to be rich. Yeah. In the broadest sense of richness.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny because for financially, I'm not well off. I'm comfortable. However, it's funny. I went to Danbury and I realized one thing. For 7 months, I lived out of a locker. And I didn't have any things. I thought my worth was what I bought people and what I gave them. Now, I really feel spending time with people is what I can give to them. I came home, I got rid of all the things, and money, and this is for most women, they don't commit their financial crime because of money for themselves. They're committing it to please other people. And that was similar to me. I felt that I needed to please other people with this financial, backing. And now, to me, I just want to be able to be comfortable, pay my bills, and watch. I mean, I'm very lucky. My parents, like you, my parents are alive. They're in their 80s, and they will watch this. And my father will probably give me slack because I said I had daddy issues. I'm sorry, Dad, but I'll get more than slack. But yeah, so it really is the experiences in life that I'm learning are the most important.
Yeah,
and not the financial piece.
Kyle Cease calls what you're talking about the illusion of money.
Yeah,
that's kind of interesting. So I'm going to dive into the deep. This is the deep question right now, and I had to reword this a couple of times because I felt myself lecturing a little bit.
Oh, God, I thought they were all deep questions, Debbie.
Well, here's the thing: as I was going through, and I go through this process of writing down the questions that I want to ask as I'm doing the research and so on, and then I go back and I number them in the order that I want them to be, and then like Top Chef, I'm like I cut and paste them so they're all in order. But as I was going through, I'm thinking this talk with Jacquie is like a master class in entrepreneurship. It's like the what to do's and the what not to do.
Exactly.
And I'm
No,
thinking,
you're
okay,
not.
how do we get a balance so we're not going fully down the business route, but we're going down the business route right now. So you've described what you call your cardinal mistake as hiring family, like everybody, and you've mentioned it here, and you've mentioned like 5 people, but I think there were a whole lot more than just 5 people of your family in your business. But I'd kind of like to put a different perspective on that, you know. So a lot of my audience knows, I'm going to be reading a little bit here. A lot of my audience knows that I was a professional accountant for 25 years, and I've been on the end of that repeating phone call first thing on the Monday mornings or the Thursday mornings from the corporate banker that says, we've got this payroll here that we need to approve. Your bank loan is totally maxed out. You have nothing left on the credit cards. There's no money in your bank account. What are you going to do? And remember, for anybody that's listening, that phone call can be to the mom and pops. It can be the people doing $1 million a year, the 10 millions, the 20 millions, the 50 millions. I've worked with all of them, and I've had those phone calls all the time. And it feels like the worst thing. It feels like a dagger to your heart, because you go in on the morning and you already know that phone call is coming. And Nike spent 20 plus years in financial crisis. This is what people don't realize, where that one phone call would have taken them down. And I've personally seen finance managers have nervous breakdowns. And these are people that don't even have a stake in the companies, have nervous breakdowns because of the stress that payroll, and payroll is the worst thing that could possibly happen. It's one thing to default on a vendor payment. It's another to default on a loan payment. But you screw up your payroll for your employees,
People's lives.
You've blown their lives up, even if it doesn't feel like that to you. So for you in the real estate industry, that 2008, 2009 subprime crisis, it simply exposed a business structure flaw. And it actually was an industry-wide fail point. And you weren't the only one that went down, like a whole industry failed in 2008. And but you had already taken a second job, right? You were working at GMAC because you didn't have enough money.
You knew this. Wow. Yes. I worked at GMAC as a loan officer to pay some of the salaries of my company.
Sounds kind of ridiculous, right?
Oh, now I'm like, what was I thinking?
Yeah.
Yes, I was. I was an employee somewhere else, making money to fund my business as well. I don't bring that up often.
Yeah. So that's the point that I want to make. And this is where I want you to give yourself some grace. It wasn't hiring all your family that was the problem. It was not paying attention to the numbers, not staying on top of your business, not being willing to say, this business is not sustainable. We need to shut the door, or we need to do something else. That's that not being willing.
Oh, absolutely. I agree 100%.
And I need people to hear.
I wasn't waiting for that call, because I had my best friend was my business manager, and my niece was my closing manager. And I did think for a long time things were they were doing well, because I was also working at GMAC. And what I didn't know was, in order to get a closing done, I would get paid $85 for a closing, for a notary. In order to get a closing done, a lot of times my niece had so much stress and pressure that she would offer a notary $100 to go do the closing just to get it done, but it was more than what I was getting paid. So I wasn't paying attention enough to the stressors that were happening to the people in my own company and to the company finances. And that is a huge problem. We allow our businesses to control us. We don't control them. I control my business now. My business does not control me. I'm finally at a point where my business is doing phenomenal and I control it. And I pay attention to everyone, every single penny that comes in and out. But you are right. In 2009, paralegals attorneys, loan officers all went to prison, while the CEOs of Wells Fargo, Bank of America, GMAC did file bankruptcy. They did not have any accountability to what was happening to the mortgage industry at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's the reason why on all the softwares, on all these things, we all have, there's dashboards on all of them, so you can see your key metrics.
Yeah.
And and it's easy to say, well, that's the reason, but really the reason businesses fail is because the owners, now pointing fingers, we're all guilty of it.
Absolutely.
We don't keep our fingers on the pulse and the heartbeat of the business, or we're too damn involved that we can't see what's going on out there. There's two extremes to it. So that's my masterclass in business today.
And I can add to that. The number one thing I may, and I still every once in a while I'm guilty of it, is to check your accounts receivable. I would look at it and say, oh my God, these people are 4 months behind. Why are we still doing work for them? And constantly thinking, oh, they're going to pay me, but you continue to keep them on as a client while they're behind. And when is that cut off? When do you say, no, we're not doing work for you for free any longer? Yeah, I find a lot of small business owners do that because they're so afraid of losing a client.
Exactly. And that's it. But that's a self-worth issue.
Yes.
It's money blocks and it's self-worth, because what's really kind of interesting, this has been a trigger point for me for quite a while. My daughter and her husband have been married for 13 years, but her husband is from Wisconsin, and his mom owns the largest collection agency in Wisconsin.
Oh, wow. And
it is a ultra successful business at the hands of people who didn't keep their finger on the pulse of the dashboard in their personal life and in their business.
Yes, exactly. I don't do that any longer. I'll let our clients go a little bit. Sometimes it slips because I know how that is, but there's a time where I have to say, and it's hard. Most of my clients are attorneys, and I have to say, I can't hold you anymore. Can't sustain it.
And it happens on both sides. I've been on both sides. I've consulted with companies that have been bought out of receivership and they're trying to rebuild. So they're trying to rebuild those things. And on the other side, where you're trying to maintain the credit, it's such a fine line. And to a certain degree, this is where women's intuition, sixth sense comes into play in business. And believe me, guys, anybody listening, it is a valid tool in business.
Oh, it absolutely is, especially because you're borrowing from Peter to pay Paul, and then you're saying, okay, I'll pay that back. But what I didn't realize is, well, if you don't have the money to borrow it in the first place, you shouldn't be borrowing it, because if those clients aren't going to pay me back, now how am I paying that loan back? And it's a vicious cycle that just keeps continuing on and on and on. And for men and women, especially in a small to medium-sized business, they get caught up so easily in that circle of, well, let me fix this, and then I'll fix that later. And then it just continues to go down that rabbit hole where nothing gets fixed and it implodes. And that's what happened to me.
Okay, so let's get off of business. Okay. We're going to go to parenting this time.
Oof.
I know.
My daughter's over there, so I can.
So parenting from prison, I think, is likened to parenting as a military spouse that's on deployment, or to someone whose business requires one of the partners to be traveling away from home all the time. In that you want to be part of the family, you want to have a say in things, you want to be, stand as a united front, but to a certain degree, some of what you say has no teeth. Because, and I don't want to use the word enforce, because that's just not the right word. What was the biggest challenge for you parenting from prison?
Well, my kids, when I actually finally got to prison, they were in college. My little one was a senior in high school. So my parenting part was done. They were adults. They were all 18 and over. But the hardest part is they could not call me when they had a problem or needed help. I needed to trust in my husband and trust in my parenting prior. And I think the largest part was just not being a part of their everyday life and help them with decision making. At that age, decision making is crucial for kids. And they couldn't just pick up the phone and call me. So we had scheduled, and because I had adult kids and 3 of them at that time, I mean, when I met my husband, I adopted his biological daughter. So I have 3 children, and they all wanted to see me because they all had problems. But in prison, you're only allowed 4 adults at one time. And so, or 3 adults at one time. And I have 4 in my family, my husband and so they would fight amongst themselves of who could come and see me and who had what issue. And we did a lot of emailing, and I heard about my daughter's boyfriends and things that went on in college, probably, Debbie, that I would not have heard of if I was home.
Which is good.
Yeah. I met a lot of women who were parenting young kids. And the number one thing is you have to trust in the people that are parenting them, that are with them, and you have to step out of it. You can be in their lives. I know some people may disagree with me. You can parent to a point, but there is no, I'm going to punish you, no timeout. There's none of that. You can't have that. So communication has to be the number one key, the honest, open communication, or everything would implode.
That's interesting, because as you're talking about that, I'm thinking, having been a single parent for pretty much all of my life, there are times when as a single parent, and yes, you were married again, but for the single parents listening, that you would like that option to be able to go to jail and not have to parent.
Times now, I no lie, where I say, oh God, I wish I was in Danbury today. Because Danbury was filthy. It was disgusting, but it wasn't a jail. Right. There was no locks. There was no bars. There was no. I was in Danbury with a woman who had 4 daughters, and her husband was also incarcerated for a financial crime. Same time. And they were very fortunate to find people in their church community that one family took 1 child, another family, I think they were separated, in 2 went with 1. I'm not sure. But her largest thing is she had to trust in these people she didn't really even know to raise her children, because she could not control anything from inside. And I say a lot to many of my clients, you cannot live inside prison with 1 foot out of prison and 1 foot in. You have to take both feet and bring them inside, and you can't go around it. You have to go through it. And
a great analogy.
Yeah, you can't do it, because a lot of people try, but it's a different environment. It's a different world. People never imagine that this world that you're going into is an alternate universe of what we live in. There's rules that are not rules that would be on the outside world. There's rules in the inside world, and they're completely different. And there's parenting inside. I had a prison daughter, and when the girl called me mom for the first time, I had no idea. I thought she was kidding. She was a younger girl. I used to give her advice, and someone said, "You know what? You better take that serious." And I said, "What do you mean? Prison mom is a serious thing." To this day, she calls me.
Wow.
And her mother calls me. So you're parenting inside, because there's a lot of young kids inside prison.
Yeah.
A lot.
Interesting. Okay, so you mentioned emails and phones right in the next question. So for the time that you were in, so that was for 7 months, just to give people a perspective, you had a grand total of 300 minutes a month to connect with your family by phone, right? So 3 kids, husband, parents, extended family, because you described your family like you got the big Italian family happening there. So to the listeners, so guys, get this in perspective. 300 minutes is 5 hours, and that's the average time today people spend on social media. But you had that to split over an entire month. So how do you see time today?
Precious. It's priceless, I should say. When I could speak to my husband for 10 minutes a day, I had to schedule my time. And it's true, guys, because you sit there on social media and time that's wasted is amazing to me. And today, every single minute that I can spend with, and I still spend time every day on the phone with my kids. They don't live at home anymore. And everyone says to me, you waste so much time, and I waste time with my kids. I've had people say that to me. You're wasting time with your kids. It's a work day. Maybe it's because I had no time with them at one point, but time is all we have. My parents are 83. Time is, I watched my mother Friday night dance with her cousins. That time, that 10 minutes was a lifetime to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of working men and women don't appreciate that time. And right, when I was working 14, 15-hour days. And I used to say to my kids, I'm working. Okay, I'll get you. I'm working. I'll get you.
Me too.
Yeah. And we forget. And I get it now. You know, I had some issues with my younger daughter because of that. I didn't spend enough time. So time is priceless. It is.
Awesome. So you've talked about a lot about an immense level of guilt that you have. Do you find that you consciously and subconsciously deprive yourselves of things, even feelings, as a way to punish yourself? Our friend Craig refers to it as, I did this, I deserve that.
Oh, Craig tells me all the time. Yeah. For my birthday last year, my husband bought me a very expensive pair of shoes. They went back the next day.
The ones with the red bottom?
Yes, the ones with the red bottoms. And I thought, this is insane. Who would spend this? And he saved up, and I just said, I don't know. I don't deserve this. I have a restitution. I need to pay the restitution. What I did to my family and the time that they were affected. I don't afford myself things. Things to me, I think what I can give to people is my experience and loving them and being with them and time. Those things. My husband was offended. He really wanted me to have them, and I was embarrassed. I wouldn't wear them because I was embarrassed. So to me, why spend the money? I wouldn't. I'd feel shameful if I wore them because of the guilt that I still feel. And that's something I work on. But as long as I have restitution, I need to pay that. And when I become whole, that's when I'm whole.
Yeah, and that's an interesting perspective that people need to hear, is that that's a big number. That's a massive number, 1.8, $1.9 million US. That's like 2.4 Canadian.
Well, I owe 27,000 now.
Yeah.
But originally, 1.9.
Yeah.
I would never have been able to pay that back.
Yeah, it's huge. And entrepreneurship has obviously allowed you to create money streams, the legal money streams that allow you to pay that off, your family, whatever.
Well, I fought my restitution when I came home because Wells Fargo was trying to double dip. I was paying my mortgage, and they went after my husband for the mortgage.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So once he refinanced our house, that took care of almost half of the restitution. And then I fought the portion of it that was my partner's, that I pled guilty to what I did wrong. I was not going to, and I won on that.
So what did you end? What was the final number? Just in perspective, because it gives people hope, right? That just because that's what they say you did doesn't mean you have to lie down and get bulldozed over.
Right, exactly. My actual crime, what I pled guilty to, was $439,000, and that was my mortgage. And that's what I pled guilty to. The rest of it, my attorney just said, just wait till you're home, wait till, and I did everything. He did right by me. I did everything he told. And then once we refinanced, the bank became whole. But then to prove that to financial litigation, that was a whole lot. I've been home 5 years, and we just resolved it last year. So that was another 4 years of my life.
Right. And that's what people don't get, is you don't just walk out the door and things are like all rosy and cherry. There's a whole cascade of, it's like trying to cross a landslide area. There are boulders constantly coming down that you still have to navigate to get to the other side. So in a money coaching group that I'm in, and I honestly love it, they talk a lot about guilt and not buying things for yourselves and economy class versus first class. And what's interesting is for women, one of the areas that people don't talk about is underwear.
So expensive.
Yeah, exactly. That's where they tag the guilt right away. I'm not good enough for.
No, because we have some underwear.
Yeah, worn out elastics. I know, guys, too much.
I will say, what is wrong with these companies charging $80 for a bra? You know what, guys? You're lucky.
Yeah, exactly. It just takes that pin and goes into your self-esteem and your self-worth again. So
yeah,
the guys have similar problems, but they use different words for it.
Yeah.
Okay. So at Danbury, you joined everything.
Yeah.
Everything you did. And I know in the group, that's something that they talk about, get involved in this, to teach. And some of those things are what propel people into careers afterwards. How has those, and I don't know what you did. I know, there's dog training and there's kitchen work and you worked in the administrator's office. How have those experiences informed your life after prison? Do you use any of those? Do you see yourself helping other people? I don't know. How do you use those now? Or do you not even?
I do not even. I mean, I took every class you know what, actually, I shouldn't say that. It helps me in understanding religion. I took every religious organizations, and I'm fascinated by different religions now. But otherwise, the classes they have, Debbie, are not geared for, and we had balancing your checkbook. I'm not kidding. How to buy a house. What woman is going to come out of prison and buy a house? And but I took the class. I mean, I took every single thing. There was 2 classes that I could say changed my life. Gogi, which is going out by going in, and that's a program. And I still live my life by that program. It's a very similar, I guess what people that have addiction that go to AA, I think it's a similar model to something like that. But there's things like 3-minute light switch. Like before you make a choice, take 3 minutes and take a break. There's little steps. There's 12 different things that help me in business dramatically and in my personal life. I became a coach. I got certified. I think it's a phenomenal program for anybody inside or outside. It's a great program. And then we did this thing called the Emmaus, which was more on a religious basis, but it was the only program that people from the outside came in. It was an older couple that came in, and there was about 20 women that participated. We would sit in a circle and just communicate about our day and our feelings. And I utilize that a lot today. Otherwise, these other programs that they claim, I taught accounting, and I think that was beneficial to a lot of the girls. I was a lot of young girls, so we played Monopoly to teach them accounting. That was wonderful. But I think for women who have an education and are there for different reasons, there is nothing. There are no resources. There was nothing I learned. I mean, I knew how to drive a Kubota. The women in any camp, the women, and a lot of the listeners, your listeners probably don't know, the women in the camps run the prisons. So they are the ones who do the grounds. They are the ones who do plumbing, electrical. If there's a problem, they're the ones who go and fix it. It's not the men, because the men are in lockdown. They're on a either a medium or a low, and a camp is a minimum. So we were we were able to freely walk around and be about. So we were the ones. So I can't say that I
So a
utilize
Kubota.
Kubota, yes. And I only learned that because my husband rented one time, and I'm like, what's a Kubota? But yeah, we had women that, and they say, oh, you can come out and you can't be an electrician, you can't be a plumber because you need to be licensed. Yes,
Yeah,
you have skills, but you can't use it in real life.
Yeah, exactly. Interesting. And the balance the checkbook. But there are, I know from our group, there are women out there and men who don't know how to do that exercise of balancing a checkbook,
Yes.
which effectively is how much money do I really have versus how much money is in the bank now before the stuff that I've committed to comes out.
Yeah. I find the younger generation do not know that.
Well, because it's
in school.
No, because it's a different, it's because there's technology that does it for you.
Yes, exactly.
I did something yesterday. I decided that since our election is coming up that, I have a few hours that I could just go and work an election poll station. I had a question there. You had to, you had to write down how many voters there were in category A and vote. It's like, really? My 6-year-old grandson could do this, and then total up 3 numbers. I just wrote them down on a piece of paper, and I thought to myself, how many people can still add on paper?
Yeah.
And I'd already done them in my head.
Right? You need a cash
knowledge
at the store.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so I got to check and see what this question. Okay, so your prison journey. Now, I'm guessing a lot of people think your journey is fairly typical because you went from prison, and yes, it's a camp, but for the average person out there, let's call it prison. You went from there to a halfway house to home confinement to then you're free, you're not on probation. But in talking, you've said that was a nightmare. I'm just watching this massive, the big drills that drill holes in the ground. He is now about 30 feet away from my wall.
Oh, he is? Oh, dear.
And I'm thinking, oh, just keep moving. Be quiet, but keep moving. But a lot of people think that that's the normal path. But you've said that you would, in hindsight, you would have preferred to take prison directly to probation, which felt like at the time you had to make that decision a much harder path. But the reality is sometimes choosing a better hard is a better route. Can you talk to that?
Yeah. And I had a lot of women inside give me that advice not to go to halfway house. But when you're inside, you're feeling, my God, halfway house I'm going to be able to see my loved ones. In essence, I couldn't, I saw them less. And a camp is prison. I mean, it's just no bars, but everything else is the same. But a halfway house is jail. It's a house and you're locked in. There's no outdoor. And I was in a halfway house that's for federal and state. So I was with women that committed heavy duty crimes, and there was a lot of drugs that were being ignored. So there would be drugs being, pulled up to the 2nd and 3rd floor. And to me, I was there to be halfway home. But a lot of women that were there, it was their home because they didn't have the means to go to a home. They had to save to go to a home or whatever the case. But it was in a very bad section of Hartford. And we had to, at 8 o'clock in the morning, go out and look for work. So I would say, no, I have a job to go home to. Why do I have to go look for work in this area? I'm an hour and a half from my home. In 2 months, I'm going to be home. What am I going to do? Quit? No, you have to go look. So I had to leave and take a bus. I'd never taken a city bus. I know that sounds ridiculous to a lot of people, but I had never. And it was scary for me to take a city in the middle of a very drug
a rough section of town.
And it to me made no sense. It made no common sense. And the entrepreneurship in me comes up, and I'm like, I could run this halfway house better than these people, because this makes no common sense. You're making these women go out at 8:00. Half of them are just putting down, they're looking for a job. The other half are sitting in the park smoking pot. So that's involved. It was horrible. The halfway house to me was horrible. And then going to home confinement from there, it appears to be easier, but the halfway house is overseeing that home confinement, and they call you all day and in the middle of the night. And if you deviate from anything that you're supposed to deviate from, you're going back to prison anyway. And it's so easy to deviate, because if you don't answer, if I was on the phone with a client and the halfway house called, I needed to hang up with the client, because if I did not answer that phone, there would be a potential for me to go back to prison.
In the dog world, you're describing living on a shock collar.
Yeah, exactly. And it was sickening. And probation was fine. My probation officer was very cool. They make sure you pay your restitution. That's a totally different thing. But if I was to do it all over again, I would have stayed in Danbury until I can just come home and go right home to probation.
It's interesting, because I've heard you guys talk in the group, the men and the women all over the United States and other places, about halfway houses and how horrible they actually are. And I had the experience when I was first trying to go back to the accounting world after my bad choice. I worked on contract with the John Howard Society, which, as one of the 5 things that they did, they ran a halfway house in Ottawa, and it held people from, some of the most well-known criminals in the world. And in fact, just a couple of years before I went to work there, one of the workers, a female, had been murdered by one of the inmates. So although the environment of it was different than what you guys described, it's still a stressful and very inequitable environment, because you're putting people of conflicting backgrounds and stages in a hot pot. Yeah. And it doesn't make sense.
No, the mental health aspect of it does not compute to me. Mm-hmm. And the mental health aspect of all of criminal justice does not compute to me. I think a lot of the problem is, and to me, it's an easy fix. I mean, in the United States, we use prisons as mental health facilities. People have addiction issues, they go to prison. People commit a financial crime, they go to prison. Any crime, a DUI, prison. Everything is prison. But there's nothing that is helping those people overcome and go through their situation. When you're going to prison, you're basically going around it. You're going to prison, you're doing your time, and then you're coming home, but you never go through the problem. You never discuss the problem. You never get to the root of the problem to actually change. Yeah. And that is my problem, or my biggest complaint with the criminal justice system, that there's no rhyme or reason. We are a punish first society. And I don't know a lot. I mean, don't get me wrong. I believe there's consequences to everything you do.
Yeah. Yep.
I committed a crime. There were consequences. I do believe 7 months was a good time for me to figure out, wow, look at where I landed up. 10 years. There's women I have one woman who's doing 30 years for a financial crime. She'll die in prison. Yeah. And what is she learning after that? There's no restorative justice. There's no, and the recidivism rate for financial white collar crime is 94% or something like that. They're very little. And addiction, you're not fixing or helping the addiction by just throwing somebody. All they're doing is pretty much you're throwing them in there and they're going to detox. Yeah. And once they detox, they're coming back out again to start over.
Yeah, it's the same. It's the same in the money thinking and so on. But we were talking about where I live. I'm in downtown Calgary. So
yeah,
big, fifth biggest city in Canada. But what you don't see is when I stand on the edge of my terrace, there's a T intersection. So it's like a high rise, a high rise, a high rise, a high rise, and then there like a little road between, so how they get into the garages and so on. But there is a constant stream of homeless, vagrant, and drug addicts coming down these laneways because the safe injection site is across the street. The park is on the other side. And what's interesting in Calgary is that the bottle depot is 2.5 blocks away, and they make their living by picking up bottles because there's a bottle deposit.
Yeah.
But when I moved here, I came here in my Toyota Matrix. I'm a minimalist to start with. I had everything I owned because I sold all my stuff, and I didn't have much stuff to start with, was in my Toyota Matrix, including the dog. And in that car, I had less stuff than some of these people who everything they own that's of value that they think is giving them something is in these handcrafted shopping carts and wagons. And lately, there must have been a shipment of suitcases come into the Goodwill because they've got big suitcases or converted baby strollers and trailers. Yeah. You'd be amazed what they can make with. But it's a fundamental failure of society.
How is Canada versus the United States with incarceration? I don't really know much about. Like I'm doing a lot of reading on Switzerland, on other countries and how they incarcerate. Is Canada similar to as bad as America is? As we mass incarcerate in America.
Yeah, the answer is I think we're sitting somewhere in between. We had this discussion before we started talking about progression and so on, but I think we're further ahead as far as alternative options, as opposed to just throw people in jails, because our jails are not the same as the American ones. It's not a big business type thing.
Okay.
Our jails are depending on what province and so on, but there isn't this big private industry of jails and so on. It's more government oriented. And we don't have a proliferation of them. You can drive around the US and every big knoll you come over, if there's nothing around, 10 miles before there was a sign that says, do not get out of your car. And then you come up to this beautiful landscape scenery with a horrific laser wired building, with turrets on it. And we just don't have that, nor do we have the population. We're only 33 million people. 33 million people is New York City. Maybe.
Yeah.
So we've got so much geography, so it's different. And I think we look at people differently. Our biggest challenge is in the indigenous world, and that would be likened to the Mexican or the Latin population coming into the US, but the indigenous population is from here.
Right.
That's the Indians, and I'm in the heart of that. So, so that a lot of these are people who've been displaced out of their family culture. Yeah. What do they do? Yeah. Yeah. So that's our little jaunt into criminal justice. Yeah. And so, and it could, there's so many different perspectives and topics and so on. So now I've got another big one. So for every entrepreneur, it's so important to surround yourself with the right people, your circle, coaches, a mastermind, people in the industry that you look up to who have similar values to you, literally at every level of your business. You need to assess your circle. You might have to change it a little bit. So how do you think your circle, who you describe as most business owners I knew were straddling the line of illegality and business savvy, affected your decision making?
Yeah, I agree. I don't have that circle anymore. I have a very different stand on things. To me, friendships and people I look up to have changed drastically before, and we could say post and now. So beforehand, if I saw a business doing well financially, I thought that was success. And what that business owner was doing was successful. They have this money. Now I have a very different definition of success. Success to me is my employees living comfortably with ease. I'm very much about family first now, where before I would, what do you mean you need the day off? No, you can't have the day off. Where now you have to take the day off. You need a mental health day. Your son needs you. Your daughter needs you. And I have to be honest, my circle of friends are mostly felons. And they're mostly people who have gone through some, I don't know if I could say it on your show, but I will, some shit.
Yeah.
They've been through some, they've been through some shit, and they've come out on the other side, and they have a different perspective on life, a different perspective on the meaning of people. There's a lack of humanity in the cutthroat business world. And in the world I'm in now, I feel as if we can have humanity and business. My daughter's starting to take over my title search company as I migrate to Evolution Reentry, and she's learning that it's okay if somebody needs a day off. Mm-hmm. And she'll get upset. And I'm no, you know what? You're going to need that when you get a little older and have kids. You have to have family first, and it can work fine. So the people that work for me now all work together as one. We don't have but I shouldn't say work for me. We work together. We work with each other.
It's a different perspective.
Before I was the Gestapo. Well, you're not, you have to make this much money. I don't care if our company makes a dime, as long as everybody's paid, as long as I'm paid, and they're all paying their mortgage. They're all living okay. That's what's important. And I think businesses forget that. It's, these CEOs, Jeff Bezos making the money that he made, Debbie, flying to the ridiculous moon, or he could have eradicated hunger. And to me, that is so offbeating. He needs to spend a year in a prison and change his perspective. And I just think that business owners need to understand that line is less important than they think.
Yeah.
And
there's someone on Instagram. I don't know whether you follow him, Glenn Stearns. He was he was on Undercover Billionaire. Great perspective.
He does. And that's that line. Why even bother coming close to it? Why put yourself there? I'm also older, so that helps too.
But we've proven that older doesn't make it smarter.
No, it really doesn't. I mean, I'm back in school. If I was smarter, maybe I wouldn't be back in school.
Okay, so I just have a few more. So I don't want to go too long, because I know you and I both running busy businesses. We've got to get back into that. So how would you describe yourself pre-getting caught and post-getting caught in 3 words? What 3 words would describe you?
That's hard, Debbie. All right. Post, cocky, condescending, fearless. Afterwards, and this is business, confident, fearful, and grateful. Very grateful.
That's awesome. Amazing what life lessons can do for you. So another short question. What does the freedom to not have to lie mean to you?
Again, do you know the only word that comes to mind when I say that is priceless? And it's not have to lie, it's more I wouldn't want to. That sickness, that oh God, when you're lying, anybody who lies, any kind of lie, even when you're a kid and you lie, that sickness. Because when you tell a lie, you have to remember that lie. Because if you forget, then you're lying along the way. I don't ever have to, and I'm getting older, so I don't remember what I say half the time. So I don't have to worry about it. That's really what it is. I don't have to worry about what did I say, because I am who I am, and I'm just authentically, it's the authenticity that's important to me.
And that's what I love about you is you're authentic, you're transparent, you put it all out there, and you're open about how you've evolved. So I have one big question, and then we'll just
These
kind
are
of
all good questions.
I know you keep saying that they're really not that big. This one is I'm curious to see what the answer is. How do you manage the new business not taking over your life? Do you have a set of boundaries, or is this still a work in progress?
It's still a work in progress. In the beginning, I did not have boundaries, and it was taking over my life. Within the last 4 months, I have now brought other women involved, and I now am able to relinquish control, and I know what my worth is and what I'm best at. And now I know what other women are best at. So we have mentorship that I don't necessarily have to be involved in. So I trust the women. That's with Evolution Reentry. With my other company, I've just let it go. My daughter's doing an amazing job. She doesn't need me. Yeah.
Good.
I look it over though. I keep looking at the receivables.
That is so good for you, because I know that is a struggle for women and for men, is to maintain and even identify that they need boundaries, especially for those women that are in empathetic businesses, that are empaths, that type of stuff. They want to be helping people all the time, and all of a sudden they realize that 24/7 their life is being pulled, dealing with crises from other people. So as much as we want to be there for them, we can't unless we've got boundaries. So that is fabulous to hear.
I mean, I'm fortunate. My husband, he checks me.
Good.
He's like, this is sucking the life out of you. You need to stop, because it's always a work in progress. When that's instilled inside, it's always a work in progress. I'll always. That's not something that you could fix. Nor do I want to fix it. Honestly,
Can't fix it with a massage.
I just have to checking myself, but I wouldn't want to be non-empathetic. I want to help people. I just need to check myself so I'm not hurting myself by helping other people.
Perfect. Okay, so as the segue into that, so this is your platform. Talk to the audience. What do you do? Who do you help? And how do you help them? Okay,
well, I am with Evolution Reentry Services. I help people get prepared for prison, women, and I work with all women, not just white collar, not just with any particular cultural background. I work with all women, and coming home from prison, the transition. And we have a great network of women that we have chat groups. We have a Wednesday night support group for women and families. We have daughters on there. We have wives on there whose husbands are incarcerated. Any woman who needs any kind of support, that Wednesday night platform is wonderful for them. And currently we are planning our 3rd annual retreat for women. And we empower. I believe in empowering other women. And it's not really just for incarcerated women. It's women that need support in mental health aspects, the controlling, the people pleasing, all of those things that are the same with incarcerated women. It's not just a population of women who've been to prison. It's just a population of women.
That is awesome. So with that, where can people find you, and how can they connect with you? And we'll put all this information in the show notes so that they can reach
Wonderful. You can. I have website is www.evolutionreentry.com. You can email me at evolutionreentry@gmail.com. I also have a podcast called Criminal Justice Cafe that is on every platform. And it's criminaljusticecafe@gmail.com. And that is for our listeners. We are trying to have people who are not in the criminal justice industry understand what it is to be part of the criminal justice advocacy. And that's how you can find me.
Awesome. Fabulous. This has been the most amazing conversation. Thank you so much for coming on. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did.
Oh, I did. Thank you. It's so wonderful to talk to somebody who's like-minded and just wants to empower men and women. So thank you for having me.
Perfect. And guys, we'll have all that information for you in the show notes. And we'll see you probably tonight.
I will.
Okay. Bye. Thank you, Jackie.
You're welcome.
Guys, are you as excited as me after listening to Jackie and you can't wait to share the episode? Well, we've got a special treat for you. This plus 2 more crazy powerful interviews, all on video, along with some live training with me in our Bounce Back Entrepreneurs series. Get exclusive access, front of the line. Just head on over to our central home on the web, debbiecolburn.com/links/ and drop your email in to open up the All Access viewing page. Again, that's DebbieColburn.com/links/.